The American Revolution did not happen overnight or by accident. History teaches us the long list of laws and restrictions Great Britain imposed on the colonies following the 7 Years' War that led up to open rebellion by 1775. But the seeds of independence were sown a generation earlier in a great religious movement called the Great Awakening.
The Great Awakening began in the colonies in the 1730s and took root quickly. It was a direct response to Europe's Age of Enlightenment, which sought to ground religion in science and reason. The religious fervor of Great Awakening ministers brought spiritual matters back into focus and challenged the long-held authority of the established clergy. Itinerant ministers traveled from village to village, preaching the doctrines of the Great Awakening. More than just rational instruction of religious principles, they reached their audiences in emotional, often electrifying ways. This new style was a dramatic shift from the pious, authoritarian preaching of the state-sanctioned Church of England and even from Congregationalist clergy.
Preaching the need for Christians to be born again, the Great Awakening put the focus of salvation on the individual. It was no longer under the control of an ordained elite. The movement caught fire up and down the eastern seaboard, crossing class lines and shaking the status quo. Historians estimate that as much as 80% of colonists were directly exposed to the New Light preachers who touted the new birth of salvation. The Old Lights bristled at the revolutionary notion that salvation was primarily between God and the individual. Meanwhile, new denominations like the Methodists and Baptists surged in numbers as they filled open-air revivals.
Preachers on both sides of the Atlantic like Jonathan Edwards, George Whitefield, and James Davenport became some of the first true celebrities in the New World. Jonathan Edwards' sermon, Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God, delivered in 1741, became one of the most widely read religious texts outside the Bible. Thousands gathered to hear these new light preachers as they traveled from town to town, often unwelcomed by the established clergy, spreading their message with urgency and passion. John Wesley, founder of the Methodist Church, played a key role in the movement, preaching salvation and the case for human sinfulness. He appointed hundreds of missionaries to spread the gospel to the New World.
The movement lasted from the 1730s through the 1770s, right as the Revolution was gaining steam. The religious fervor and the intolerable actions of a parliament and king thousands of miles away were about to collide. If individuals could experience salvation based on a personal relationship with God, why couldn't they question their relationship with their government as individuals too?
If the blessing of sanctioned ministers wasn't necessary to go to heaven, were monarchs and nobles necessary for earthly happiness? If a colonist and their family could live, work, pray, and do good without elite approval, why couldn't they make their own laws, levy their own taxes, and defend their own freedom? The Great Awakening shattered the idea that a privileged few controlled the path to prosperity or eternity. Even the Old Lights couldn't ignore its impact. Their thinking, and society's thinking, was being transformed.
The Great Awakening wasn't just a religious revival, it lit the fuse for something bigger, a widespread desire for personal autonomy and civic responsibility. It stirred a longing for independence in every corner of life.
The men who convened for the first two Continental Congresses were steeped in what the Great Awakening taught. They had all come of age in this time period. There was a healthy mix of old lights and new lights who gathered in Philadelphia. The issues they debated, the steps they took, and the documents they signed all placed personal responsibility for their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor squarely in their own hands, following a central tenet of the Great Awakening teachings. By applying religious principles to civil matters, they tore the reins of governance from the old authorities and placed them into the hands of the people. The preachers who challenged established powers may not have lived to see the temporal fruits of their efforts, but their message laid the philosophical groundwork for the American founding.